Our 1000th episode is coming out in June, and I know you want to send me a present. You probably want to Venmo me some money or do something, but you don't have to do that. The best present you could give me is to go do a review. We are trying to get 1,000 reviews of the podcast by the 1,000th episode. If there's an episode that stands out to you, something that's impacted you, and you've never done a review for Practice of the Practice, head on over to your favorite place that you listen to the podcast and do a review. We are trying to get 1,000 reviews by our 1,000th episode. We'd love for you to go leave us a review for the Practice of the Practice podcast. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 992. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving practice that you absolutely love. We want both sides of that. We want it to thrive. We don't buy into what we're often taught in grad school, that you have to be a martyr, that you have to, make just, hardly any money, or that somehow if you make money, you're a bad person. We don't buy into that. But we also want it to be a practice you absolutely love, where you can show up and say, oh my gosh, this solo practice or this group practice, I can't believe I get to do this. That you get to work with the clients that you want to work with, that you get to work in the areas that you want to work. And a ton of you have been interested in psychedelic assisted therapy. And, we put out on Facebook, we reached out to a number of people that we respect to just talk through psychedelics, to educate yourselves so that we can ask these deeper questions. Consider, maybe adding this to your practice, maybe not, but just really being able to at least have some more education. We're never going to be able to capture all of this. There are so many great podcasts that only focus on this topic. And one that I would definitely say you all should listen to was put up by the New York Times. It's called Cover Story. It's probably 8 to 10 episodes, and they really dig into kind of the underbelly of psychedelics. My guide had said that, before I jump into too much of this work, she really wanted me to listen through that. And it really kind of talks through the sides that often aren't talked about. So I really appreciate that series too, if you're looking to dig in some more. If you haven't read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, that's, a great place to start as kind of a primer for all of this talk. Also, my attorney wants me to remind you that in many states and parts of the country, what we're talking about is still considered illegal. And, sometimes you have to partner with the FDA or other things. Make sure that you talk to your own attorney about whatever you're planning, just to know your own risks as you jump into this kind of work. Well, today I am so excited. I have Talia Eisenberg, who is an MBA and a serial entrepreneur and the co-founder of Beyond.us, a San Francisco and Mexico-based company providing safe and effective psychedelic assisted Ibogaine treatment for those suffering from trauma and addiction. Talia, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you here. So, we've heard a lot about psilocybin, ketamine, ayahuasca. Ibogaine's not one that I've heard a ton about. So let's just start with, what the heck is it?
Yeah, so Ibogaine is, I think, one of the most rare psychedelics, although lately it's getting a lot more attention. Iboga is a plant, right, that comes from Central Africa, and it's been used for hundreds of years during shamanic rituals there. Ibogaine is purified in a lab, and essentially it's been used in the West since the 70s, when it was discovered to have anti-addictive properties. A man named Howard Lotsoff in New York City discovered it. He was basically just trying various psychedelics. He also happened to be a heroin addict, and he got his hands on this psychedelic, Ibogaine, and he had a very powerful journey. And the next day, he had no cravings for heroin anymore. And that sort of sparked this underground movement related to Ibogaine. And since then, there's been a number of, scientific studies, and many people have used it, and clinics have popped up around the world. However, it's been very helpful for addiction. And as of late, it's been used more for, well, it's also been used for addiction, but it's also been used for PTSD and TBI. And then you have people that are just coming for optimization and spiritual experiences. It's a very powerful medicine, and it's known to be very long lasting. So the trip itself is about 12 hours, and it's the longest lasting of psychedelics and just as intense. And I think, there's one of the challenges is there's some cardiac risks with it, which is another reason that it's fairly unknown and not used as much as something like psilocybin or ketamine. It's also illegal in the US. So that's just a broad overview of what Ibogaine is.
Yeah. So how were you introduced to this kind of work, and what's it done for you?
Great question. So, about almost 15 years ago, I was living in New York City. I was 20 years old, around 20, 21 years old. And like many people, had become addicted to opiates, to Vicodin during a routine dental procedure. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was treating underlying trauma, intergenerational trauma, I believe. I had always, felt this gnawing anxiety since I was a child, sort of like I didn't belong here. And what am I doing? Where are we going? This sort of existential questioning of what, why. And I think when I tried that Vicodin after this dental procedure, I felt a sense of peace, and I continued to use it. And not to mention that New York City is anxiety inducing in the first place. But, so there I am in college using opiates, buying opiates off the streets, doing whatever I can. And before I knew it, I had a pretty serious habit about 2 years in. And I was, very fortunate that my parents kept shoving me into some of the best rehabilitation centers in the US over a course of a few years. And I realized after a couple weeks, I couldn't help it. Even if I wanted to be sober, I needed physiologically an opiate, and I would end up relapsing. And so this was this cycle that many people experience, an endless cycle of trying to stay sober, but then failing. And I ran into a friend who had done Ibogaine, a friend that I used to be very social with in New York City. His life was different. I hadn't seen him for a few years. He was married, he had a new company, he was doing really well, about to have children. And he said, yeah, there's this very, unknown psychedelic medicine. You have to go to Mexico to do it. Just go do it, and the desire, the cravings will be released, and you won't want to use it anymore. But more interestingly, it will help treat some of the underlying causes, and you might have more insight into why you're doing this and how to change your life. So I did. I flew to Mexico, and the place I went to, was not equipped, I would say, didn't have the correct medical infrastructure or therapeutic support, but I did receive the Ibogaine, and I did have a very profound awakening. The desire for an opiate was gone. And more so than that, I was able to see and connect to my ancestors. My grandparents, survived the Holocaust, and I was able to forgive, the persecutors, and I was able to see that we're all in it together. Humanity's all in it together. That there's something greater than me, right? And I had a purpose in life, and that was to help others and be of service to others. And um, so I haven't touched an opiate or even alcohol or stimulants since then. And that was almost 15 years ago. And that lit a fire in me. It took, another decade, But I ended up going back to school, getting an MBA, meeting my husband who's in recovery, and we now have children together. We've started wellness companies, and this was a company beyond Ibogaine that we started in 2021 because we felt that there's a terrible opiate epidemic, there's a psychedelic renaissance, and there's a need for solutions to this problem, to not just addiction but to trauma, right? So we have a mood and trauma program, we have a dependency program, not just for chemical dependencies but also behavioral addictions. It works very well. And then our third offering is a health and optimization program for people that have already done a lot of work but need more clarity or in a life transition or want to better themselves in certain ways. And that's how Beyond was born. And I live currently with my husband in Cancun and our children. I'm here right now. And we continue to grow. We've treated hundreds of people. We have about 5 full-time doctors, physicians, because that's what you need with Ibogaine. There's some cardiac risks, and we have more than a dozen of ACLS certified nurses, and we have a number of adjunct therapists as well. So cold plunge therapy, somatic therapy, art therapy. Preparation and integration work is very important here. Why are you doing this? What is your intention? How can you take the insights derived from the visions that you have and apply them to your life? Since Ibogaine, unlike many of the other psychedelics, it stays in your system for months afterwards, and you have neuroplasticity, and that lasts longer than psilocybin or ketamine. So you have months to create new habits, and it's easier to do so. So it is a much bigger experience, but one can argue you have months to integrate the experience and create new habits. And so the question becomes, what are those new habits?
Mm. Imagine the impact you could have with your clients when you are able to practice the most cutting-edge modality available today. Psychedelic therapy is the future of mental health care, and the Integrative Psychiatry Institute will empower you with the tools and knowledge you need to master this exciting modality. IPI's comprehensive training and in-person experiential practicums will elevate you both personally and professionally. This in-depth curriculum is the gold standard certification in the field. When you join, you will step into a global community of thousands of innovative colleagues who are integrating psychedelic therapy into their practices. Visit psychiatryinstitute.com/apply, where you will find all the information you need about IPI's training. And when you visit psychiatryinstitute.com/apply, you will also receive IPI's free e-report on the current state of psychedelic therapy, so you can get the most up-to-date information immediately. Again, that's psychiatryinstitute.com/apply to learn more about the training and get your free report. Now, before we started recording, you were talking about some new research that just came out. Can you talk through some of that research? I know that you've partnered and talked with the researchers and are connected there. Would love to just hear more about the research that's coming out.
Yeah, so as it relates to TBI and PTSD, there is this new landmark Stanford study, and maybe you can link to it here in the podcast, that came out about a month ago, led by Dr. Nolan Williams from Stanford and his team. It basically took 30 Navy SEAL special ops through Ibogaine treatments and showed that this greatly reduces depression, PTSD, TBI, suicidality, even months afterwards from a single dose of Ibogaine. And that was profound. And these Stanford researchers, who are who don't use psychedelics themselves, basically it broke their calculators. They couldn't believe how positive the outcomes were. And there's future write-ups related to this study that show the neurogenesis that Ibogaine does cause. Um, it works on something in the brain, a protein called GDNF, glial-derived neurotrophic factor, which is what's responsible from the ages of, a child from the ages of 0 to 7 who feels joyful and courageous and excited about life again. That's the protein. And Ibogaine is really the only natural occurring plant, Iboga, that stimulates this protein in the brain. So that is a very exciting study. And Dr. Nolan Williams even said during the MAPS conference that it Benjamin buttons the brain about a year and a half for every time you do it, just for one single dose. So it reverses the brain age.
Wow. Now, I mean, to me, that just seems like something that when I hear that sort of breakthrough, I mean, right away, I think like, how are big corporations and big pharma gonna like take that? Like, there's so much power in that sort of thing. Like, how do you think through, or what are the discussions that are happening around, when these kind of breakthroughs in the actual proving of it in science, um, how do people even think through that or talk about that? Like, what kind of discussions are happening?
Yeah, so there's multiple discussions happening right now. There's discussions for, of course, addiction. And I don't know if you're aware of what's been happening in the States, the opiate abatement funding in Kentucky and now in Ohio, that's where these politicians and change makers are open to allocating some of that funding for research, right, for opiate addiction, as some of the money won from pharma and distributors who have helped created this epidemic. So that's pretty interesting. And then there's for-profit biotech companies that are trying to patent these medicines. And there's a range of feelings around that from various people who, don't think nature should be patented. But of course, there needs to be funding for this to reach the masses. One of the like we're above ground. We're a medical facility. We're licensed here in Cancun. We can't do this in the US because it's still illegal. So in order for that to change, we do need to continue doing research in the US, and ideally, maybe this can be to reach more people and be more accessible, because we get so many emails every day from people that can't travel or can't afford to come here. And I think one of the things that could shift that is the research. And if this were to be taken through the FDA, sort of like MDMA and what MAPS has done, it would reach more people. It's just about how can we do that in a timely and effective way, and maybe not be owned by a mainstream pharmaceutical company. Because when that happens, the price for the end user goes up. So that's a problem. Can it be done in a generic sort of way similar to MDMA? And I don't know. We'll see. And these are the discussions that we're having and others are having behind the scenes right now, given that not just an opiate epidemic, there's a trauma epidemic, which is even bigger worldwide and in the United States. So those conversations are being had, and various states are open to research, and we're getting calls regularly about that. So
Mm.
we'll just continue those conversations, and hopefully, these medicines, when used in a effective and ethical way, in a container that's not just giving people a pill, but therapeutically, they work. We see that. And yes, it's true, they're not for everybody. We screen people out who have severe psychological disorders and others who have cardiac risks. But for many, there's a profound change that occurs in a very short amount of time because they are able to get a bird's eye view of their life while they get the physiological repair in their brain. So it's very powerful, but needs to be used with reverence and respect.
Yeah. For that reverence and respect, a lot of these plant medicines, started with indigenous cultures, and they had a certain way that they did it and a certain method. And I would love to hear how you think through progress, or how things change over time, or how do you have that reverence and respect while also, there's people that are doing new and innovative ways of treatment with psilocybin, or with a lot of these different types of treatments that were not even close to what the original way that it was done, but it also is new and helpful. So, like, how do you think through that side of the issue in regards to having that respect and reverence of where it came, while also recognizing that there's new applications for some of these plant medicines?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. We have Western minds, right? We have Western problems. Like part of my own healing after I did Ibogaine was to go and work with ayahuasca in a dieta setting with Shipibo people in Peru once a year. I would go for 2 or 3 weeks, and I remember the shaman there saying to me, "You Westerners, you keep everything in your head. We've never seen anything like that. We're used to people being in their bodies, but you hold everything is so intellectual, and your fears are in your head. All the energy is in your head." And so
Mm,
we've really had to take something, in Gabon and parts of Africa where this is used, people dance, and that's just part of their lifestyle, and that gets them into their body, and that's part of the rituals around Iboga as well. So we have to adapt for Westerners, right? And I think part of what we're trying to do is marry some of these rituals. Like we have fire ceremonies and candle ceremonies where people paint their intentions into their candle the evening before their ibogaine treatments, married with Western coaching and therapy and more intellectual based healing, as well as, of course, a medical setting. We have a clinical setting in a retreat like, center. So there's yoga, there's body based, there's daily massage, um, there is, art therapy, things that are more expressive with the body, married with Western medicine. We do labs and blood work and EKGs for all clients, um, because we need to, right? We're dealing with the Western demographic. We're getting people off. Sometimes we're getting them off of fentanyl, and we have to switch them over to shorter acting opiates before their ibogaine treatment. So we've really had to try and take the best practices of more Eastern practices married with Western practices.
mm. Yeah, I think that, that idea of that a lot of the problems or anxieties or things that we're dealing with is coming from a Western mindset, and so sometimes adding in some of that Western medicine mixed with, indigenous knowledge, can be helpful. Yeah, I think it's such a conundrum in a lot of ways, because it's like, of course, I would hope that we all want to respect that knowledge and respect it and do it in a way that, doesn't just co-opt it, while also understanding that sometimes, the best new ideas are when old ideas are mixed together. And so I think that, yeah, I don't know that there's a direct answer, to it, other than having conversations and trying to enter in with respect and reverence for what's been before.
Yes, I think one thing we try to do is we work with a nonprofit in Gabon called Blessings of the Forest, and we give a percentage of revenue every month to them. And they're on the ground in villages making sure that the medicine is sustainably sourced, that the locals are taken care of for their hard work, that they're not losing their culture there. There's, different activities that they continue to be able to hold on to, that it doesn't become too westernized there. And that's really important as a way to pay reverence and respect to this work. So I think looking at the whole supply chain, not just the end users here in the West, but how can we make sure the medicine is sustainable? How can we make sure culturally that the Westerners aren't just coming in and taking all their medicine supply? How can these people, they deserve to have the medicine for themselves, right? And to be able to buy it them, for prices not to be hiked up for them locally. So these are some of the ways that we can pay reverence, and there can be some form of reciprocity as this medicine is becoming more and more popular.
Now, being in this work, going to MAPS conferences, connecting with researchers, what are some of obviously there's lots of different conversations going on right now, but when you think about this psychedelic renaissance, over the next 5 or 10 years, and I'm not asking you to predict it, but maybe where do you hope that some of this goes? What do you think would be kind of a healthy next step in this movement?
I think that one of the biggest challenges we have is accessibility. So, I think more research is necessary, and that's happening. We're even doing research with a few universities in the US. But being able to set up some sort of a structure so that more diverse groups of people and classes can access this medicine, because right now it's expensive, because of how because our I don't know, the overhead costs are so high. And so working with more philanthropists, working with more um, government officials and structures to make this more affordable and accessible is very important. And research is going to help with that. And I think that's one area and one way we can make this more accessible, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
yeah, yeah. Well, the last question that I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that this is a profound tool. It's not a silver bullet, but it's a profound tool for people that are ready and willing to do the work. That we see people coming in the darkest of places with no light left in their eyes. And as they go through this process on site, which is typically 7 to 14 days, depending, people become more in touch, back in touch. It's a remembering of their true natures and their unique gifts, why they came here, their potential. And to witness that, I guess I would say we I wish everyone could see that shift in somebody in a short amount of time, to see somebody find their purpose and remember that who they're not the things they may have done in the past. They're not their shame. They're not their story, that they can, in fact, reinvent themselves. That's the power of this medicine when used in an effective manner. So I would tell them it's possible, and, you know, that nobody is alone, and they're welcome to reach out and have a discovery call and learn more.
Hmm. Talia, if people want to reach out, if they want to send referrals your way, if they want to talk about the appropriateness of a referral, where's the best place to send them?
They could come to our website. It's BEOND, no Y, BEOND, Ibogaine, IBOGAINE.com, or our social media is BEOND.US on Instagram. We have Facebook and TikTok as well, but that's where they could find us. And we have discovery calls all day long that are free, and about half an hour or less could learn if this is the right option for them. We also talk to a lot of therapists and doctors who are interested for their clients, and we're happy to have those conversations as well. Occasionally, we'll have therapists and doctors drop in here in Cancun. We'll schedule that, and they can witness the work. Those are the options.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, as you go into your week, have some of this in the back of your mind. Think through, what does this look for you? What does this look for your clients? This series is meant to educate, inform, inspire. Maybe it's raised a bunch more questions for you that are ideas for what we could do as deeper dives into some of this work. Drop me an email, joe@practiceofthepractice.com. Happy to always take ideas on different series. A lot of times, some of these series, when they come up, just come from people asking a question, and I may then repost that question on social media, and then we get a whole lot of responses. So, back in November, I had just put out, because someone had a question about 7-figure practices, and I think I had 20 or 30 people that reached out that said they had 7-figure practices. So we did that whole series in December and January, all around 7-figure practices, because people just had those questions. So if this has kind of stirred some things up for you, please reach out, let us know. Find us on social media, drop me an email. We would love to talk more. We couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors. If you're like me, you like to gather a lot of information before you make a new decision, like adding a new modality to your practice. That's why I'm so excited that our sponsor for this series, the Psychiatry Institute, has put together an amazing e-report called The Current State of Psychedelic Therapy. You can get that totally for free over at psychiatryinstitute.com/apply. That's where you can get that free report, The Current State of Psychedelic Therapy, again over at psychiatryinstitute.com/apply. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.